Hi again. I know I said the film loading video was going to be the last in the Bronica SQ-Ai series, but after I'd uploaded the videos, I kind of thought of a few other points which I'd forgotten to make in them, and also some of the questions and comments that people have been leaving on the videos kind of made other things pop up in my mind, and also particularly James Wilgeroth, James, I hope I'm pronouncing your surname correctly there, who has an SQA, which is the earlier version of this camera. He was talking about some of the differences between the cameras, which made me think about that too, so I thought it would probably be helpful to just have a little, to mention it anyway, so that if you're looking to buy one of these second-hand, you can understand the differences between what you would get with the older and newer cameras. So first up then, the differences between this, which is, if you remember, the SQAI, which is the most recent version of the camera as it was made in production. The previous version is the SQA, and then prior to that is just the SQ. You tend to find SQAs and SQAIs on the second-hand market, and the main differences between them are, first of all, well, if you pick up the SQAI, you'll realise that the body is made of polycarbonate rather than the solid metal of the SQA, and also a lot of the internal components of the SQAI use plastics and such like as well in order to try and keep the weight of the camera down, presumably probably the cost as well. Now I know for some people that might well be a deal breaker. It's very difficult, to convince some people that a plastic camera can be as good as a solid metal camera, but this is polycarbonate we're talking about. It's a very strong material. It's similar to the kind of things that they use for making bulletproof glass and car headlamp covers and stuff. So it is very strong. And for the time I've had this camera, which is 3-4 years or something, I've not had any problems with it whatsoever. So I have no qualms about using a plastic camera, as it were. And actually, in fact, the only part of the camera which is showing any wear is this little dent on the waist level finder here, which is ironically, that's the only part really that's made out of metal on the exterior of the camera. So take from that what you will. The other main difference, I would say, and I prepare, I guess, to be corrected on this, but as far as I am aware, if you want to use the newer PS lenses, so these are the more up-to-date lenses. They have more up-to-date lens coatings, and they also have the half-stop apertures as well. You cannot use the newer lenses on the SQA or previous cameras. You can only use them with the SQAI. On the SQAI, you can use the older lenses, so using this, the most up-to-date camera, you can use any lens that was produced for the SQ series of cameras. So, that's not denigrating the old S lenses. They're still very good lenses, but the PS lenses just have perhaps the edge in sharpness and colour rendition with their more modern coatings. So that's another thing to bear in mind if you're buying. If you want to use those modern lenses, you need the AI. Also, in terms of batteries, the SQAI uses, we did look at these very briefly in an earlier video, but the SQAI uses these 4 of these little button cell batteries. I can get them out here. And these are 1.5 volt button cells. The code is LR44 for the alkaline, or SR44 for the silver oxide batteries. So the SQA, the previous version of this camera, uses a single 6 volt battery, and the SQAI, as we see, uses the 4 button cells. Interestingly, the 6 volt battery that the SQA uses, if you were to peel the outer packaging off of that, the outer covering, and open it up, you would actually find that there's 4 of those little button cells inside. So it's essentially the same battery, it's just a different packaging. In terms of the accessories that you can use with the cameras, with the SQAI, you can use any accessory that was made for the whole SQ range. So you can, if it's available there, you can use it on this camera. With the SQA, which is the earlier version, you can use any of the SQA or SQ branded accessories. But there are some of the accessories which were designed for the AI system which you cannot use. So, for instance, the motor drive will only work with the SQAI, and also the most recent auto exposure metering prism will also only work with this camera with the SQ-Ai, simply because the earlier cameras have got different wiring and different contacts in them, so they will not work with some of those accessories. So again, if you want a motor drive, if that's a big deal for you, you need to get the SQ-Ai. In terms of little smaller things then, the SQ-Ai, as we mentioned, has a bulb shutter mode on it, where if you hold down the shutter release or lock open your cable release, the shutter will stay open for as long as pressure is on that shutter release. That is not available on the SQA. And also the SQ-Ai has a 16-second shutter speed, whereas the SQA, the longest shutter speed you will get off of it is 8 seconds, as far as I am aware. Again, I stand to be corrected on that, but I think that is correct. There is ways with both of these cameras, with the SQ-Ai and the SQA, of doing long exposures without using any battery power, and that's controlled by control on the lens, but I'm going to talk about that in a little bit later on in this video. Also, in terms of accessories, the SQ-Ai has this port here for the TTL flash metering. You can connect a module to this which allows the camera to talk to, say, a METS flash gun, and allow proper flash metering. The SQA does not have the wiring or the contact for this, so if you use a lot of flash, if that's a big deal for you, again, you're going to want to get the SQ-Ai to have that functionality. The other thing as well, if you're looking at second-hand cameras, you may come across the SQB, which was basically the budget version of this camera. It was brought out, it was released at the same time as the AI model, and essentially it was a cut-down version of this camera without the wiring in it for talking to the metered prisms. It doesn't have the bulb mode. It also uses a very simplified film back as well, which doesn't have these contacts for connecting to a metered prism as well. And that was kind of aimed at probably, I would say, the kind of educational market or people who didn't want to spend a lot of money on a camera in initial purchase. To be perfectly honest with you, with the second-hand prices the way they are right now, I paid just slightly over £300 for this camera, as I said, 3-4 years ago. The way second-hand prices are, you might as well spend the money and get the SQ-Ai, because really there is not that much price difference. These are not expensive to pick up on the second-hand market now. If I was you, and this is obviously just my opinion, the SQ-Ai is the camera that you want to go for, because it gives you access to all those accessories, to the PS lenses, and it gives you the most functionality for your money. Okay, so that's the differences between the cameras. I'm now going to talk about just a couple of things. These are things I'd kind of forgot to mention in the earlier videos, but I think are maybe important. And the first one is something that might catch you out when you first use this camera if you're not ready for it. So in order to do this, I'm going to have to kind of bodge things here a little bit, because I actually have film in all of my film backs. So what I've done is I've put a film back on here which has got some old out-of-date film in it that I don't really mind possibly getting light to, but I don't want to use loads of film. So I'm going to put the camera into double exposure mode, and I'm going to pull the dark slide out ever so slightly to disengage the safety feature there, which stops you from taking a picture. So you've got the camera, first time you've used it, you take it out to take your first picture, you press the shutter release, and this is what happens. Okay, where's the view gone? I'm going to say this right now, this camera does not have an auto return mirror in it. Okay, it's not like a 35mm SLR. When you press the shutter, mirror comes up, shutter opens, mirror comes back down again, and you get the view back. Okay, there is no auto return. There's nothing wrong with the camera, but what you have to do is you have to wind on the mechanism, and when you do that, when you cock the shutter and cock the mirror, you'll get the view back. Okay, now that might seem obvious if you've been using the camera for some while, but if you've never used one of these cameras before and you're not ready for it, it can be a little bit disconcerting. You might think there's something wrong with the camera. Another thing that can catch you out if you're not used to this, and as far as I'm aware, there's no mention made of this anywhere in the manual, and this actually caught me out a little bit the first time when I was using it. If you're using multiple film magazines, you might find that, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this magazine off and try with a different magazine here. There we go. What you might find is you change magazines, you come to take a picture, you press down the shutter release and nothing happens. And your first thought is, oh, I've not taken the dark slide out. You check and, well, hang on a minute, the dark slide's out. Right, okay. So the next thing you think is, well, let's check the battery. So we press down the battery check button, red light comes on. We've been through everything and we're thinking, well, hang on a minute, what's going on here? Is there something wrong with the camera? Is there something wrong with the lens? What's going on? I can't take a picture. Basically what happens sometimes is the gearing here, which connects the film magazine to the body, has to be in sync. If that gets out of sync when you change film backs, it won't let you take a picture. And all you have to do to remedy this, and it's probably not going to do it now. No, it's not. I need to try a different film back for this. See if it works. Basically what you need to do is when you change to the new film back, is you need to give the winding crank either a part or a whole turn. No, it's not going to do this one either. I can't demonstrate this to you, I'm sorry, because these backs are all in sync with the body, but what you might find you have to do is you have to partially or fully turn this crank to bring the body and the film magazine into sync with each other. Now don't worry, you're not winding on the film, you're not wasting any film, you're basically just syncing the two parts of the camera up. But as I say, if you've never experienced it before, it can be pretty disconcerting, and the first thing that leaps to your mind once you've checked all the other options is, my God, there's something wrong with the camera. There's not something wrong with the camera, you just need to work the shutter lever. Okay, the next thing I'm going to talk about, and again I'm just going to swap back to a different film back to show you this, is a way of doing long exposures with the camera. Just make sure we are in sync here, without having to use any battery power. And it's using something that I call the T mode or time mode, and it's located, if we turn the camera over, control for this is on the bottom of the lens here. You can see we've got this little silver pin and we've got a slidey switch here, which right now is showing A for automatic, which means that the shutter will work on the normal automatic mode. But if we get in here, and it can be quite fiddly, but if we get in here with our fingernails and pull this pin up, you can see that's up now, and then slide the switch across so that we can see this red T here for time. Now, if we fire the shutter, you'll see that the shutter stays open. I'm not having to hold anything down here. I'm not in bulb mode either. You can see we're at 125th of a second. This control basically overrides anything you've set on the camera and will keep the shutter open until you come back down here and you slide the switch back over to A. You can see the shutter's closed down now. When you've done that, you want to make sure you put the little metal pin back down so you don't knock that switch. So essentially it's a way of taking long exposures, overriding the battery. It uses no battery power to hold that open, and it's a good way of doing your long exposures. You know, if you're doing night photography or very long exposure photography where you may be taking 10-15 minute exposures, it's a good way of not wasting your batteries. Finally, and another thing to do with the lenses on this camera, I'm just going to wind the camera on so I can take the lens off. If we remove the lens, and I'm just going to put the camera body out of the way here, and we have a look through, obviously we can see through the lens right now. The reason for this is the aperture blades and shutter blades are cocked in the open position. Bronica recommends that if you're going to store these lenses and not use them for an extended period of time, then you want to release the shutter mechanism in here in order to release the tension on the springs and everything within the mechanism, and that will increase the lifespan of the mechanism. It's quite easy to do, but it can be a little bit fiddly. If we look on the bottom of the lens here, so next to where the Psycho branding is on the bottom of the lens, there's a little pin here, and what you need to do is just press a fingernail in against that, hold it down, and then get hold of these two pins here which operate the shutter and slide them all the way around until it clicks, and you can now see that the shutter has closed down there. That's how you would store the lens if you're going to store it for any long period of time. And what you have to remember is when you come to use the lens again, before we put this back on the camera, we have to cock the shutter, and to do that we just get hold of the two pins, we slide them round so they line up with the green dot and click into place, and that's the shutter cocked, and we can now put the lens back onto the camera. Okay, so that really was the last video in the series. I hope you found it interesting, and as ever, if you've got any questions or comments, please put them in the comment section. Thanks very much. Bye.